unlock the mics, I think they said.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you all for coming. It's great to see so many supporters of early childhood education all gathered in the same room. ECE, as you know, has been a top priority of mine and of a number of the members here. It's ECE is where I came from, and ECE cuts were the precise reason why I decided to run for office in the first place. This is the first of many hearings of the Blue Ribbon Commission on Early Childhood Education. I established this commission to have a forum outside of the budget process to discuss our ECE system and how to improve it. The commission is a bipartisan effort with legislators and advocates from around the state. I want to thank Assembly Members Garcia and McCarty for serving as co-chairs. I want to thank Assembly Member Blanca Rubio and Assembly Member Phil Ting for joining us. And I know that Assembly Member Brian Mainsheim will be joining us a bit later. I also want to thank all of the, and to thank all the members who have agreed to serve for the time and attention you are devoting to this critical issue. My hope is this commission takes the ECE discussion away from the annual budget fight where someone has to lose and someone else has to win. It's important that we all win on this one. And with that in mind, I'll turn it to Ms. Garcia.
Good morning. Excited to have our first commission. We've been getting ready for this for about a year now, so it's excited to see it to fruition. And as the speaker said, we need to make sure that we're all winners and we take this away from the budget for all of our children out there in our future workforce. The Women's Caucus has been working on early childhood education for a number of years, and it's exciting to be working with these stakeholders on a regular basis and the assembly members and our speaker here as we continue to invest. Last year, we got about $530 million in a continuous appropriation for early childhood education to start to deal with the rates, but we are not done, and we also know we have at least 300,000 students that are in need, children that are in need of these slots, and we need to fix that problem. So excited to continue to delve into the issue beyond the budget to make sure we have quality access to education that works for our kids and works for our parents with their various schedules that they have out there. And so I look forward to learning from all the experts here along the way and fighting the good fight for all of our children across the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. By the way, welcome to my district here, the Assembly District number 7. I just want to start out by thanking the speaker for number one, his leadership in making this a priority of everything you're focused on as the Speaker of the State Assembly, and knowing that what you said early on, this is such an important topic, not for you personally, but for the benefit of California. So thank you. And I also want to acknowledge my co-chair, Assemblymember Garcia, and my colleagues, and all the other public members. This is something that I think can really lead us forward on such a critical issue for California. We know that early care and education not only helps families and children, of course, but also helps our economy, making sure that kids have a right start and we address the achievement gap. Research shows that having robust investments in ECE helps address issues like criminal justice and tackling poverty. So really all the issues that we're trying to tackle as a state, we can really dig into in early care and education. And this commission, as the speaker noted, I have the benefit of chairing the budget subcommittee on education and finance in the last couple of years. We've had some investments, some improvements, but we still have a long way to go. But we want to think big picture. We want to think years out there, not just for us, but we're going to have, frankly, let's face it, an election next year for a new governor, and we think this body can put a plan forward that can help frame the debate for the next administration, what our priorities are in California. So we really want to focus on where we're at now, but where we're going, and with the, keeping our eyes on the prize, how we can help kids and families on these critical issues in California. And I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you. Assemblymember Ting.
Thank you. Well, it's an honor to be here today, and very much have felt the impact of early childhood education. I have a daughter who's 10 and a daughter who's 6, and they both entered into daycare when they were both 4 months old. And for so many of us as working parents, working families, this is a very critical issue that we couldn't go to work without the assistance of those in the child care, daycare field. But oftentimes, we haven't always done it the service that it deserves. We have, at times, a somewhat disjointed way that we have approached it. We look at things like K-12, and now we've added TK to it, and we look at preschool, then we look at child care. And it's very rare that we have an opportunity to look at things from 0 to 5. So I'm very hopeful and very excited about the proceedings for our commission and an opportunity to really look at how we serve children starting from really from birth to when they're 5 years old, and really figuring out how best the system should work. The system, frankly, has evolved over time as a reaction to working families having both parents working, and it's been now a cycle that is not clearly going to turn around. I mean, we're going to continue to have most likely 2 working parents in most households in California. And really, what's the right system that we should develop for that, and what is the state's role in funding that, as well as how we should be supporting it. So, again, very excited to be here and look forward to a robust discussion over the next few months.
Assemblymember Rubio.
Thank you. Good morning. I spoke to several of my commission members, but I'm a former teacher. Just left the classroom in December and spent a few years teaching kindergarten. So I realize how important the early childhood education is. You can tell the difference between a kindergarten student who actually had preschool or pre-K and a child that didn't. So it's really important for me as well to participate, and I look forward to working with all of you. And I'm, just really honored to see so many wonderful people that are so invested in our kids' future. And I agree with my colleagues. If we do the right thing now, we will have a whole bunch of money, because we won't have to use it on prisons and anything else that is eating up on that budget. If we spend the money now, I think it would do us great. It would be a fabulous thing for California. We can be the leaders that we are today and continue to be for the rest of the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we're excited to hear from our public members. And before I introduce the first one, I did want to note that our speaker really wanted to make sure we had a robust public participation on the panel with diverse views and backgrounds. And so pleased to see all of us here today. So we'll start with Michael Olenek.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Speaker Rendon for appointing me, and let all you folks out there who usually sitting out there with all of you, so it seems very strange to be sitting up here. What I wanted to say was the early childhood field is kind of like an elephant. We all look at it from our own perspective and our own lens, and each one of those perspectives has its own advocacy group. And over time, we've tended to pit the various ages of kids against each other, so infants and toddlers against preschoolers against school age. We also pit delivery systems against each other. So, we have the education system, K-12, Prop 98. We've got R&R. We've got subsidy system. We've got Head Start, Early Head Start, Child Care Partnership preschools. We have home visiting. We have general child care, state preschool. We have family, friends, and neighbors. And we have licensing. And that's probably not all of them. But we have all these different delivery systems. And then our perspective on who the customer isn't clear. Is it the child? And if you're thinking about it being the child, then you're talking about early learning, you're talking about quality, you're talking about quality rating improvement systems, you're talking about K-12 preparation, TK, ETK, preschool. But is it the parent? And when you're talking about the parent, you're talking about full day, full year, workforce demands, non-traditional hours, and safety. What about the provider? You've got teachers, you've got family child care providers, you've got family, friends, and neighbors. And the vast majority of the ECE system actually operates outside of the state subsidy and the state support, but the state impacts a great deal of the local practice. So we have to keep that in mind. So I don't think you can blow it up and start over again. What we need to do is focus on how we balance all the competing interests while ensuring that both children and families are served well.
Thank you. Nina Bouthé?
Hi, good morning. And I wanted to thank the speaker as well. It really is my honor to be up here. Like Michael, I'm usually in the audience, so it's a little surreal to be from this perspective. But I'm really excited about this commission and really excited about not having to be reactive to the budget and really be in a body where we're looking and we're dreaming and we're visioning of what our early care and education system could and should be in California. And, with the recent California Budget and Policy Center, they did a research that shows that only 1 in 7 children eligible for subsidized child care services are actually receiving them, which just shows us this huge unmet need that we have in California. As well, with the recent well-fought-for minimum wage increases, we're really at a crossroads where our families are starting to not be eligible for services, while equally our providers are struggling to keep open due to some of these recent increases. And we're also at a intersection where we can really jointly work together, where we can put some of the different pieces of the early care and education system, and rather than, like Michael said, pitting one against each other, really taking a global perspective at it to really see how can we create a system that allows families and parents to work while their children are in high-quality early learning environments that put them in a position for future success. We have a balancing act here, which is going to be hard to do, which is why I'm so excited to see all of us from so many different perspectives coming at it, because we have provider rate reform that we need to look at. We have a bifurcated system in terms of reimbursement rates. We have the issue of professionalizing the industry and looking at what our teachers are compensated at. And we have much needed increased access for both 0 to 3 and preschool and school-age children. So for me, we really need to look at some robust systems and solutions to some of these critical problems. And I'm really optimistic about this committee, and I'm really optimistic about the brain power and passion both on this committee, this commission, as well as those in the ECE world to really be able to come together and lay a pathway for our future in California to ensure that every child and family who needs these services receives them. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also want to note, I didn't reference your affiliation, but Nina is the California Child Development Administrators Association representative, and Mr. Olenek is the president and CEO of Child Care Resources Center in Los Angeles. Next, we'll have Deborah Kong, the director at Early Edge California.
Thank you. It's a privilege to serve on this commission. I want to thank the speaker and the co-chairs for making early childhood education a priority. I'm looking forward to rolling up our sleeves and coming up with an agenda that's ambitious, that thinks big, that's system-wide, and also coming up with an actionable set of recommendations and a clear plan for implementation. And along the way, engaging the next leadership of our state through the gubernatorial candidates, as well as, of course, the current administration and members of the legislature. As the commission identifies how we can create a more sustainable early learning system and update our funding plan, I'm looking forward to working with and learning from my fellow commissioners and those in the field about how we can fundamentally improve quality and in particular support the early childhood workforce so that we know their teachers and caregivers are key to the success of our children. And I'm looking forward to figuring out how we can elevate their status as professionals, ensure that they have the compensation, the training, the professional development that they need and deserve. I also want to flag a recent new study by the National Academies of Science on dual language learners, which make up the majority of our population, birth to age 5. I'm so proud that California has been a leader in standing up for our diverse populations, particularly our immigrant families. And I think we really have an opportunity to lead the way for dual language learners as well with the implementation of Proposition 58. We know so much more about brain science and language development and what our dual language learner children need. So I'm looking forward to incorporating that into our recommendations. This is a very exciting day for me. I've been an advocate for a long time for early childhood education. There was a time when we could barely get on the radar, and so it's very exciting to see it be a top state priority. I'm looking forward to working with you all to keep it here and to make sure that we get it right for our little kids.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Celia Ayala, Senior Advisor, LA Up, Los Angeles Universal Preschool.
Thank you very much, and I echo the gratitude and leadership to the speaker and the co-chairs and everyone really in this room, because I think we all believe in this work, otherwise we wouldn't be here, either on that side of the room or this side. A lot of what's already been said I strongly believe. But I also want to make sure that the people that are in the audience and the people that are watching wherever they are, they know that this is a long, tedious process, and that we should look at something that is not going to happen overnight, that we need to look at something that I recently stepped down from being CEO, and after 42 years, I see a lot of progress. But I expect that the progress in the next 10 years is going to be as big as what we've seen in the last 40 plus. And it's only because we are now in the same room. We are talking about the whole child. We are talking about all children. We are talking about not only the child, but the people who care and teach our youngest children, to really look at the implementation of another study from the National Academy of Science in terms of transforming the workforce, because we need to pay attention to who they are, what they need over time, not overnight. And then last but not least, in terms of a systems approach, and I really appreciate that when the speaker was talking about an ECE system and how to support it for the long haul, that we are not here every year asking for a little bit more, give me some this year, take it away from you, but that we really look at building an infrastructure and a system that is for and about the kids of California. So I'm really excited, and things do happen, because I was in another committee about 8 years ago, and I see the remnants of QRS pieces in our state. So lots of us that been there, we know it can and it will happen. So thank you so much for the leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Ayala. Next, we hear from Tonya McMillan, SAU Local 99 member and child care provider.
Good morning. I have been doing child care for 24 years now, and every day I get to see mothers practicing a balancing act. We've used that word quite a few times this morning. Practicing a balancing act where they have to struggle at low-wage paying jobs to make sure that their children get the care, the child care that they need. But I also, along with thousands of other child care providers, practice a balancing act at the same time, because at this present moment, we make less than the minimum wage. And so I'm very excited to be here. I thank the speaker for allowing me this opportunity to sit here as a family child care provider, boots on the ground, another person who's out there struggling to make ends meet. I also wanted to add that it just upsets me when the mere mention of union or collective bargaining is mentioned when it comes to the workforce that I have devoted 24 years of my life into, brings gasps or moans and so forth, when it's very important that this workforce be recognized for what we do, what we bring to the table. And so we all know that there needs to be a change. I'm very happy that we're now being a part of that change. So I'm hoping that the conversations will lead to a solution, but I'm very excited that an actual family child care provider who's out there answering the mandates that are pressed upon us is now a part of the group that's going to make the solutions, that's going to make things work for children and for families and for family child care providers. So thank you.
Thank you. Mary Ignatius, statewide organizer of Parent Voices.
Good morning. It's an honor to be on this commission with everybody here. Thank you, Speaker Rendon, and the members of the committee. I'm here representing parents. We're Parent Voices, and like Tanya, I think the fact that parents are part of the solution is critical, and without parents seen as a true stakeholder, I think we could fall in the trap of creating programs that they cannot then access. And we have to be really clear about our system needing to adapt to the needs of families instead of families having to adapt to a system that is leaving them out. I get worried sometimes when people think the child care system is broken, because what I see is the strength and resiliency of parents and providers and the entire child care infrastructure that is holding together such a critical part of society. And what's broken is just we're not funding it as it should be. And if it was funded, just how incredible the transformation could be and how incredible the quality could be lifted. And so I don't want to say the system's broken. It needs some help, and it needs some prioritization, and it needs some leaders ready to take action on it. And I think everybody on this commission is ready to do that. So I'm really proud to represent our members. Having a long-term vision is critical in what we need right now. I really want to see us start to infuse what having a race, class, and gender lens of the system could look like, because I think that's something we're often not talking about, but it is our Black and brown children who we're worried about, and so we need to make sure our policies are then trying to mitigate and eliminate those disparities. And yeah, I'm just excited to be here and look forward to having our parents come and participate in any way they can and to work with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you. Parvin Ahmadi, Superintendent of Castro Valley Unified School District.
Thank you. Thank you. As everyone has said, it's an honor to be here and a part of this commission. Thank you, Speaker and co-chairs. It's my pleasure to participate on early childhood education panel, one of the most fundamental issues of our time, I believe. I'm really excited to have heard already about that continuum that we have to look at from cradle to career and beyond. And that in order for us to close the opportunity gap, this is exactly where we need to be having conversations about. There's no question about the tremendous impact of effective early childhood education, or lack thereof, on the future of children through their adulthood, particularly for those who lack sufficient economic resources. These children start formal education. In my past 28 years of educational experience, I have seen this over and over again. They start education, their formal education, behind their peers who have the fortune to be provided access to quality education, particularly from birth. It is therefore our moral imperative, I believe, to continue to advocate for ECE on behalf of all children, especially those most vulnerable. In the words of Nelson Mandela, there can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way it takes care of its children. To abdicate our responsibility to care for our youngest children is nothing short of unethical and immoral, and our responsibility to advocate for them a moral imperative and a must. As a member of the Association of California School Administrators, our strong support is given to Governor Brown's early childhood education policy provisions. We recognize there's more work to be done to improve access to high quality education for early learners, but we are very excited to be here. And I've already met many of the commission members, and I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation as a system of supporting each other to get where we need to be to support all students. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Dr. Jacqueline McCroskey, a professor of child welfare at the School of Social Work at the University of Southern California.
Thank you. It's very exciting, as everyone said. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and co-chairs and Assemblymember Ting for giving us the opportunity to engage in this conversation. So, yes, I'm a social worker. I got interested in ECE when I made the strange decision to go back to doctoral school, and I had a 1-year-old. And I got a very in-depth education about childcare. And from that time on, I have been very concerned about how ECE fits with the lives of families and what families are negotiating, and in particular, the multiple systems that families negotiate at the same time. I want to just tell you a story about one of my recent master's students who was an extraordinary young woman getting her MSW at USC. She had gotten into trouble in high school, got into a fight, was arrested, was on probation in a group home, convinced by someone in the group home that she was very smart, finished her high school education, negotiated community college, got a free ride to USC, and got into graduate school. She was also a teen mom, and she told me the most difficult system she dealt with of all those systems was the child care system. This is a young woman who has a fantastic future in front of her. She's so wonderful, and her daughter is too. But it's California has devoted so much to early childhood education for such a long time. It's really important that we continue that work, and I'm just so grateful to be part of this with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Sonia Campos Rivera, Director of Education Policy and Public Affairs with the LA Area Chamber of Commerce.
Good morning. How do you follow that, right? I think for me, I obviously want to start by thanking Mr. Speaker and members for the opportunity to create this incredible body and allowing the rest of our my commissioner colleagues to be able to help advise, inform, and work with you to strengthen and support our system that does need a little bit of work. Excuse me. So for the business community, we are very interested and so honored to be part of this conversation. Glad that we are going to be able to work with this amazing body to provide input on what business leaders are thinking and feeling, and really providing some advice on how we can strengthen our system. There are policies that have had unintended consequences, such as the minimum wage, and seeing implications in many of our communities of the impact that this is having on our workforce. We know that this is already an issue to many of our members of the workforce, but now with some policies that are before us, I'm really excited to really identify how we could be supportive and think about ensuring that families that need access to quality child care have that in their local communities. We're very excited as well to learn from many of the members of the commission of the importance of issues for children 0 to 3, especially our most vulnerable children, like our foster children and foster parents, and a bit of ways that we could help support these children and families that need most services. Excited about all the work that needs to take place, excited that the business community is part of this conversation, and very much looking forward to building our system and strengthening our system, I should say, to ensure that California's children and families receive the services that they absolutely need. Look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you. Okay, great. Now we're going to go ahead and hear from our first panel on early learning landscape in California. We're going to begin with Rowena Kamo, who's with the California Child Care Resources and Referral Center, and there she's been working for over 9 years documenting the changing child care landscape in California. Thank you.
Hear me? Okay. First off, I want to thank Speaker Rendon for his leadership for convening the Blue Ribbon Commission, Commission co-chairs, assembly members, as well as the committee appointees for committing your time and energy to developing strategic, comprehensive solutions for a child care system that works for all children, all families, and providers in California. My name is Rowena Kamo. I'm the research director at the California Child Care Resource and Referral Network. We are a network of local resource and referral agencies that help parents free of charge find child care. There is at least one in every county in California. And I'm here to provide an overview of California's licensed child care landscape, which includes both the private paying side as well as the state subsidized care. For the past 20 years, the network has provided a bird's eye view of child care needs in California to assist local planning and decision making. The data I'm presenting today, and you have a fact sheet in here, it's the purple one, licensed child care supply. So the data that I am presenting today, and that is in the fact sheet, is from our most recent child care portfolio, which was released in 2015. Our next portfolio will be released later this fall. And we've been doing the portfolio since 1996. So we've had sort of a long-term view of the changing landscape of child care in California. So in our most recent report, it showed that licensed child care supply is only available for about 25% of children with working parents. And this is a consistent story that we've seen with licensed child care in California. And as we look at the data over time, we've noticed that the licensed child care supply is shrinking, which also has implications for the state subsidy system. Between 2008 and 2014, the total number of licensed spaces decreased by close to 5%, or almost 50,000 spaces. When we take a closer look at what is driving this decline, we notice that the changes in family child care homes outweighs the growth seen in center-based care. Since the Great Recession, center-based care has had a small increase of about 3%, whereas family child care has decreased by 18%. And so next I want to take a moment to further examine those differences between the center-based supply and those of family child care. Though the overall supply of center-based care remained fairly stable from a statewide perspective, when we drill down to the county level, 48% of counties experienced a decline in center-based spaces. And most of the declines occurred in the Central Valley and in parts of Northern California. A large portion of centers primarily serve preschool-age children, followed by school-age care. Only 6% of just the center-based supply are for children under 2 years. So that if we're just looking at center-based spaces, those dedicated to children under 2 represent about 6%. Yet, for this age group, it constitutes about a third of the requests made by parents, and that's data that we've received from the local R&R agencies. And so while we've made some gains with respect to infant care since 2008, that growth amounts to approximately 4,300 spaces, whereas preschool care during the same time period increased by about 34,000. And so this picture looks very different for the licensed family child care home supply. Since the Great Recession, 83% of counties experienced a decline in family child care home providers. And as Tanya had mentioned, it's a struggle to keep their businesses open and for these providers to make ends meet their small businesses. And so this is really crucial. And when, again, looking at this regionally, the concentration of the decline, again, is in the Central Valley, which lost more than a quarter of their supply during this time period. In Southern California, it was about 19% of a decrease. In the Bay Area, about 12%. And in Northern California, about 23% of the supply. So we see that that drastic decline, particularly with family child care home providers. And this decline makes a huge impact on the available options for families, as family child care home providers are more likely to offer care for infants and toddlers, is less costly than center-based care, and provides more flexible schedules of care, including evenings, overnights, and weekends. In our most recent report, only 2% of centers offered this type of care, whereas 39% of family child care home providers offered this to families. So again, just a very crucial option for families who are looking for non-traditional hours, who have and with young children. This also has implications for subsidized childcare, particularly among the voucher-based programs, and that's the Alternative Payment Program, CalWORks Stage 2 and CalWORks Stage 3, where 46% of children are cared for in a family child care home setting. Lastly, the last point I want to share is regarding the cost of care. I think we know that working families struggle to pay for childcare. And the high cost of care is well documented. I noted in the fact sheet that Child Care Aware of America has ranked California, I believe, the third least affordable state for center-based infant care. A family could spend around $13,000 a year on infant care in a center. We've heard comparisons of the cost of care to in-state college tuition, as well as the burden it places on parents to make a choice between spending a large portion of their income on childcare or possibly leaving the workforce and staying home to be a full-time caregiver. A single parent with 2 children making just over the income to qualify for a subsidy will spend almost half of their income on licensed care. They have 2 children. And so access to financial assistance for childcare is extremely important. And also being able to keep that assistance just as they're getting back on their feet is even more crucial. So in closing, I just wanted to acknowledge that, as a field and what all of you will be discussing, we're challenged with finding a solution to these very pressing issues and, addressing the question of how might we effectively give working families accessible and affordable child care that meets their needs. Thank you. And I'd be happy to take questions.
We're going to wait, actually, and ask questions at the end when we're done with the panel. Thank you. Next, we have Erin Gable with First Five. She is the Director of External and Governmental Affairs, and she has spent her whole life advocating for her professional life advocating for children. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Erin Gable, and I'm happy to be here on behalf of First Five California. I want to thank the Assembly and the Assembly leadership and Speaker for providing consistent leadership on this issue of how to provide California's youngest children with the high-quality learning environment that balances the twin needs of the working family and the crucial child development needs of the child. And it's so incredibly exciting to think about that vision as you're moving forward. I have the shared impossible task with Donna Sneringer here of providing an overview for you of our state's entire care and early learning system and thinking a little bit about how to frame its challenges, knowing that many of you on the panel know far more than we do. So please bear with us as we try to take a 10,000-foot view with you and know that there will be an opportunity for all kinds of questions as we move through these very complex issues very quickly, and hopefully we'll cover many of them in more depth in future hearings as well. So in preparing for today, I've created a rough flow chart that should help you with the big picture. There are 2 documents in your folder, one that Donna prepared and what I prepared, that taken together hopefully can help guide folks through some of the big picture. So you have one that's called Child Care and Early Learning Funding in California. It is a chart actually that Cadango started many years ago and that I found to be so helpful when trying to explain the complexity of the moving boxes and funding sources. And then the Child Care Resource Center also prepared for you another handout that then tells you behind each of those boxes currently how much money and how many children are being served. So anyway, I'm going to go through today. I'm your school-based tutor. So, because of course we like to bifurcate our system. So I'll be walking you through the right-hand side of this table, and then later Donna will be walking you through the left-hand side. So federal funds. As with subsidized child care, funding for the school side of our equation is significantly driven by federal funding. CCDBG, the Child Development Block Grant, Head Start, and now the Every Student Succeeds Act, which you'll hear me refer to as ESSA, all have policy and funding implications that would have implications for school-based care. Notably, ESSA now promotes this idea of using traditional K-12 spending like Title I and Title II and Title III in addition to pre-existing federal forms of education funding for early learning purposes. And this is also in addition to the funding we already receive for them for after-school funding called 21st Century. Of note, also, the federal law now, with its reauthorization, includes a definition for preschool as meaning birth through 5, which I know will be a significant issue for you as you grapple through thinking about these systems comprehensively. However, the supermajority of funding for school-based preschool and school-aged care does come through Proposition 98 funding and under the authority of the state legislature and governor. This includes the California State Preschool Program, which you'll see abbreviated as CSPP all over the place, the local school district's local control funding formula. So that is our new education reform funding program that dictates how funding flows to individual schools based off of child need. And then that funding at the school level is driven by their average daily attendance. And so you'll see how average daily attendance, or which children attend your school site, also is a funding source for early learning in our school districts. And I'm going to be looking forward to the superintendent adding anything that I miss. In addition to that, we also have our state's after-school education and safety program, which you'll hear me abbreviate as ACES, which complements the federal 21st Century Program. So first, I will touch a little bit on the California State Preschool Program, which Donna will talk about. Its twin on the non-Proposition 98 side, the General Child Care Program as well. This is our largest pot of dedicated funds for preschool. And you'll see me use air quotes a lot, which will be really annoying. But I think it's really crucial because everybody means something different by preschool, depending on where the funding is coming from, which ages you're talking about, and which settings. And so I'm going to ask you to think very broadly about the term preschool, like ESSA does, which is about a birth through 5 strategy, how we're handling children in preschool in California. So anyway, I'll stop with the air quotes after that. So this is the largest pot for preschool services in California, serving both school and community-based service providers for 3 and 4-year-olds. Sometimes we forget we're also serving 3-year-olds, so I want to note that. The California State Preschool Program, run via the Department of Education here in our state, utilizes approximately $900 million in Proposition 98 funds to provide both part-day and full-day preschool programs to serve children in local schools, and in many cases, local schools who choose to subcontract with community-based providers in their community for identical services. Part-day preschool programs serve low-income children in a child development prevent the achievement gap-based goal. Full-day preschool programs serve low-income children from working families with the twin goals of accommodating the working needs of the family and the child development bridge the achievement gap goals for the school district. Like the community-based providers, CSPP programs in schools are an earned contract between the school district and the California Department of Education, and it's based off of the actual kids served. So you'll probably hear more about that as we talk later about how the different funding sources flow. This is a capped program, and we're serving approximately 163,000 children through the Proposition 98 side of the state preschool program. And you'll hear more about the other side from Donna. The next piece of the flow chart puzzle, which I hope actually makes sense to you because it's the way my brain works, is transitional kindergarten. In addition to the state preschool program, the state has created the transitional kindergarten program, which statute calls the first year of a 2-year kindergarten program, in order to serve those 4-year-olds who otherwise would have lost their right to a free and public education when California, as a policy choice, decided to move the kindergarten enrollment date from December to September so that kids were more age appropriate for starting kindergarten in the way we have our standards today. So when we made that shift, we created transitional kindergarten and later created a policy clarification called expanded transitional kindergarten, which you'll hear about. TK, transitional kindergarten, serves 4-year-old children in the year prior to kindergarten, and unlike state preschool, is part of the state's direct apportionment to schools. So like any other grade level, they're funded directly through their local control funding formula based off of their average daily attendance. And local school districts who serve kindergartners are required to provide transitional kindergarten to those children who are in that age group. Let's see, this program serves approximately 80,000 students statewide currently, and we're about to get new numbers any day now from the Department of Education. They'll give you the latest on transitional kindergarten and on expanded transitional kindergarten, but the last count expanded transitional kindergarten was serving about 6,000 students statewide, a very small number that's changing rapidly. Expanded transitional kindergarten is a voluntary recent policy clarification that allows school districts to serve additional 4-year-old children who are even younger than their transitional kindergarten teachers. So they're born after the December 2nd cutoff, and allows school districts to start earning ADA for those children when they turn 5, but they can start serving them as soon as the school year starts. So it's a voluntary program that helps school districts to build preschool programs. Local ADA and the local control funding formula. So in addition to the ADA funds that are generated by TK and ETK kids and used to support preschool classrooms, many school districts are also using flexible local control funding formula dollars in addition to federal Title I dollars to fund additional preschool access, particularly as an achievement gap busting strategy because it's very consistent with the goals behind those programs. These LCFF funded programs run an absolute gamut from blended to standalone programs. You could see something different in every school district that you visit. And as Donna also will cover, and you see on the flow chart, we also have federal Head Start programs, which flow directly from the federal government through grants down to local agencies, which are county offices of education, community-based agencies, and local school districts. And so school districts on that side of the house are blending all of these funding streams together to create a very diverse myriad of school-based community preschools. And then we have after-school funds. So with the passage of Proposition 49 in 2002, the voters created a protected $500 million set-aside inside of the Proposition 98 guarantee for after-school programs, which are, like our community child care programs, delivered in a mixed delivery system between community-based providers and school district providers. California has created relative symmetry, unlike many other states, for our before, after, and summer school programs between these two funding sources. So our 21st century programs and our ACES programs look relatively similar. And they serve children from transitional kindergarten through the 9th grade in those campuses that are lucky enough to have received a competitive grant. That's the way it's awarded, through a competitive RFA process from the Department of Education, serving just shy of 500,000 children every school year. So I went through that all very quickly. So in addition to those care-based programs, federal and state funds also support key local, regional, state, and local systemic supports for parents and providers, including our professional learning and quality improvement systems. So you'll see on the page, I've got a little box underneath. You can see the money flow from the CCDBG into the Department of Education for quality improvement and down to this regional yellow box. That's what I'm referring to now. So these are for our quality learning and quality improvement systems. In addition to resource and referral and alternative placement agencies who serve as the front line for parents, these regional and county systems exist to support the professional learning of the providers, of the first teachers who are in our system from birth through school age. And it's supposed to be providing supports to these providers in a very diverse group of settings, from license exempt all the way through school-based, center-based care. Federal, state, and Prop 10 funds all support these professional learning systems, including the relatively new California Quality Rating and Improvement System that you heard Commissioner Ayala refer to, which has a single tiered standard for measuring quality in licensed subsidized child care settings and is intended to provide supports to all child care providers to help them in a continuous improvement model to serve according to that standard. And also to guide parent engagement and education around what quality early learning and school-age care looks like. So with that, I will very briefly pivot to framing for the Commission for just very shortly, because unlike other committee hearings or budget proposals or bill proposals, as was to echo the words of many of the commissioners, you uniquely do not have to be reactionary to what we were thinking about when we talk about early learning and care in California. You get to be visionary, and that is where I would ask first and foremost that you set a concrete vision for what comprehensive childcare and expanded learning can and should look like for California's infants, preschoolers, and school-age children comprehensively, regardless of the space where they're receiving the care, and regardless of the mission for why the state has decided to prioritize them being in a care setting. As we've covered today, our early learning and childcare system is complex because of the diversity of needs, goals, and funding sources behind each program's history. However, this diversity is not necessarily dysfunction. Despite its complexity, I think you will find a primary driver in any dysfunction in the system is actually due to a lack of resource per child in the existing siloed systems that we have, and a lack of resource around the siloed systems that we have to create what Dr. Michael Folan calls in K-12 education, systemness, an actual system and the supports and resources needed to make it function that way for parents, for children, for educators, and for policymakers as we're engaging around necessary tweaks to the system to improve it. You have the opportunity as this commission to think beyond the boxes of our current system and to think beyond the historic goals and to reevaluate those historic goals to make sure they represent the vision you want to set for all children in California moving forward. And we would ask that you think deeply about the drivers in the system's design, how that interacts with K-12 education, how that interacts with the private market, and to think about, in creating a seamless vision, the necessary resources, the hard choices about real necessary resource that it will take to achieve the system, because it will not be just a couple-year strategy in order to achieve the real vision in front of you. And at least a portion of that vision must be to strive for better access in every community to the care that we've talked about so much today, achieving the twin goals of a working family and a thriving child. During the Great Recession, we lost over $1 billion to the existing child care and early learning system. No one would argue that our early learning system was anywhere close to adequate when we started to remove $1 billion. We lost 19% and lost COLA over that time. We lost over 100,000 slots. It wasn't perfect. So rather than thinking about how to restore from those losses, we need to instead to revision where the state is going to be going. And it's going to be a complex issue that you will hear from other folks on the panel around adequate per-child funding, around access that makes sense for families, around access to quality care that makes that leverage game changer for each child, and to think about how to build those systems together. We would urge you to think about a family and child-centered design, to be deliberate about the system drivers, the right drivers, building quality, human capacity, and system connectivity, to commit to the bottom line of funding that would be necessary. And if this commission cannot commit to what that funding might look like, then maybe make the hard choices around then how you would prioritize what pieces of the system need to come first. Core principles we would recommend, we all have talked about being comprehensive. It's not just preschool, it's not just infants, it's also school age. To protect and enhance our mixed delivery system, to protect the ADA earning potential of the current system because of the stability that it represents, as well as maximizing a P through 12, preschool, no more air quotes, through 12 system and what that can look like in a mixed delivery environment that meets working family needs, that protects quality and streamlines quality, that protects and increases eligibility and streamlines and simplifies eligibility and what that means for parental access, that aligns with comprehensive child and family support systems and our partners so that we can leverage comprehensive supports that families need and that children need to actually learn, that go beyond what an early learning system can provide them in a silo. And then to decide what your access vision is, mark a course, and tell us to get started. Thank you.
Thank you. Our third presenter is Donna Sneringer, who is the Director of Government Relations for the Child Care Resource Center, CCRC, and she's been there since 1992. Thank you.
And I am very pleased to be here, and thank you to the members and to all the commissioners who are taking on this big challenge. As Assemblymember Garcia said, I've been working in this system since 1992, which means a lot of these weedy programs are things that I've lived in and tried to garden in for many, many years to try to build a good system. I did want to start off by saying that you know, the system looks very complicated from the outside, and one of my mentors, Patty Siegel, who is no longer with us, used to call it a patchwork quilt. And I would say that the fabric of the quilt varies from program to program depending on the amount of money we had to buy that particular piece of fabric. So I think that it appears very complicated. There are a lot of pieces, but I think there are many of us who have spent a lot of time looking at that and can help navigate the different corners of that quilt. But I want to start with a little bit of history, because nothing is as fun on a Monday morning as a history lesson. Right? Right. Okay. And I want to talk to you a bit about how California really has been a leader in early childhood education for over 100 years. And part of the reason we have this quilt is because of all the years we've been doing this. And while that provides complications and complexity, it also gives us a lot of expertise and a lot of knowledge about what is needed. So I want to talk a little bit. California actually had day nurseries in the early 1900s, and they came out of the child welfare system, and they were really the foundation for many of our child care center-based programs. And they were expanded significantly in 1940 when Congress enacted the Federal Lanham Act. And the Federal Lanham Act was federal funding for child care to promote female participation in the workforce. So Rosie the Riveter's kids were taken care of through dollars from the Federal Lanham Act. The war ends, the soldiers come home, and the Federal Lanham Act ends. But in California, the legislature decided to backfill those dollars and continue their investment in child care. We are one of very few states in the nation that continued that. I think there's 2 or 3 others. So we really have been doing this for quite some time. In 1965, the federal government established the Head Start program to address child poverty. And in response, California established a state preschool program because we didn't want to be not participating in trying to have better educational access for young children. You will notice these 2 programs had different goals from the get-go. One was to have women go to work, and one was to educate young children. So this bifurcated goal has been there for a long time. In 1976, under Governor Jerry Brown, the California legislature created the Alternative Payment Program, which allowed families to purchase child care in the private market through what is a voucher-based system. What this allowed was families to buy care in their community with family child care and center-based programs that met their family's individual needs. And in 1978, when Proposition 13 eliminated school districts' ability to levy additional property taxes to support child care, the legislature actually stepped in and backfilled those funds. So there is a long history of the legislature in California being a champion for child care. The next big movement was at the federal level in 1992. The passage of the Child Care and Development Block Grant was the first federal effort to have child care access available across the country. And it was followed very shortly after by CalWORKs, which was the state program that was developed in response to the federal TANF program. California had a very rich vision of what they wanted to do with their Welfare to Work program. And for those of you that don't know the acronym CalWORKs, it's actually sort of meaningful for this group because it's California Work Opportunity and Responsibility for Kids. And the whole founding of the CalWORKs program was designed to have kids have the right systems of support. So I think it's critical that we continue to lead and we continue to look at the needs of our working families and the children they're raising. And I think that California is in a good position to do that. And I'm very excited that this body is going to step back and take a good look. So as Aaron mentioned, the subsidy system is often criticized for its complexity. I would say in reality, it has really grown in a series of fits and starts, driven by different policy goals: parent employment, welfare reform, early education, and we've responded. The system itself has responded to meet those needs as those different things have come up. And I think the delivery system has proven to be flexible. I think it's proven to be efficient, sometimes to its own detriment. I think that we bend over backwards to make things work with very little money, and then we get criticized for making it work, but not as well as it should be. So I think that we kind of set ourselves up that way. And despite all of this, it effectively provides services to thousands of kids each year with limited resource and navigating a wide array of funding rules and regulations for each individual contract. My organization, the Child Care Resource Center, we administer 25 different contracts-ish with all kinds of different rules, and every program has a different thing, and what we try to do is help the family fit into the money we have. But that's probably not the best system design, so how do we work around that? I think that we all collectively need to reconcile that the system does have a dual purpose and that it's okay, that it provides support for families going to work, that are seeking employment and moving toward more economic stability while we support the development of a child. I think we get into trouble when we try to do either or. I think we end up fighting amongst ourselves, and I don't think it gets us very far. So the system clearly must continue to be flexible enough to meet the wide-ranging needs of California families for today's workforce and to develop tomorrow's workforce. So I think that that's the critical charge. So as Erin had her handout, I have mine, and we're going to actually try to merge. We've been talking about it today. And I don't want to go too much into the areas where she already covered, but I do want to point out that the estimates on here are based on Department of Finance space estimates and dollar estimates this year. So this is the current size and scope of these programs. Erin talked quite a bit about our state preschool program with its focus on early education, the part day and full day, and the challenges that provides for working parents. I think we've done a lot of work the past few years to try to make preschool provide more child care, but it was not its initial intent. The other thing that has happened in state preschool is part of the preschool system is funded through Proposition 98 and part of it is not. And the past 4 to 5 years, Proposition 98 has had generous resources to expand those efforts, and the community-based side has not seen that same kind of growth. So that is an issue you will see come up again and again. The other thing to note about state preschool is center-based care in general has very limited access in rural communities. You do not have a critical mass of children to be able to consistently run center-based programs in more rural areas in California. So it is a limitation that it faces. The other side of the center-based system that Erin didn't get into was the general child care system. And this is non-98 funded. It is targeted to children birth through 12. And it looks very different in different communities. The contractors are both local education agencies and community-based organizations. Some focus on preschool-age children, some focus on school-age children, some focus on both. I will say there are not many that focus on infants and toddlers. And that has to do with the reimbursement rates and the cost of caring for babies. So that is one shortcoming. The other side of the system is the voucher side, and that's the side there that I am most familiar with. And it is basically two parts. A very large piece, which is through the CalWORks system, which was created during welfare reform and is set up to assist families with child care needs as they move from welfare to work. And California set up a fairly robust system where families coming in go into stage 1, and they're offered a child care subsidy to allow them to start their welfare to work activities. They then move into stage 2, where they stay until 24 months after they finish receiving cash assistance. And what is very unique to California is stage 3. And stage 3 is ongoing assistance until families reach an income level where they can pay for their own care, theoretically. So this system is pretty large. We serve about 128,000 children. It looks a little bit different from county to county. In many counties in California, the county administers stage 1 and the child care agency administers stage 2 and 3, but in about 30 of the counties, the child care agencies run the whole program. This allows parents to buy any type of care they want. They can use a family friend or neighbor. They can use a licensed family child care provider or a center-based provider. And for families who are moving from welfare to work, it is critical that they have those flexible choices. What we find in our subsidized population in the CalWorks program in particular is a lot of work during non-traditional hours, families that work in the service industries and have very unpredictable schedules. So this really does meet their need. The other side is the alternative payment program, which is really for welfare families who do not enter the welfare system. So these are families that are low-income working families, many times have very similar socioeconomic conditions as CalWorks, but they have never formally walked through the doors of the welfare office. This program is relatively small. It is about 32,000 kids statewide, and several people have referenced some work done by the California Budget and Policy Center looking at the need for care. If you look at 1.2 million income-eligible kids in California and think we're only serving 32,000 in this program, we're a little out of whack. There's just a lot of need that we're not anywhere near. And I will say the alternative payment program, which also allows that flexible purchasing power for the parent, is kind of the golden ticket of childcare. If a family gets an alternative payment space, they can have that with them as their child grows, moves into formal education, and it's something they can continue to use. And they're very reticent to leave it if they get it. It's something that families really value, because when you have an infant, you may make different care decisions than you're going to make for your school-age child, but their subsidy stays with them. So the portability of it is really a value. So that's a lot of technical and detailed information. I'm hoping that this will be a good reference chart to look back to, and I'm happy to answer more questions. I did want to talk a bit about some of the issues to consider in looking at the subsidized child care system. And I do think that there's a real opportunity here. There are things that many of us have been working for many years to try to fix through the traditional budget and policy discussions, and they're just too complicated. They are costly, and they are just tricky to try to put through pieces of legislation or through a very last-minute budget discussion. So the things I really would like to leave with you are looking at the woefully inadequate access for low-income working families, particularly for infants and toddlers. I think that this is a real issue. The cost of infant and toddler care is overwhelming for most families, and I think that trying to look at how we could really start to make a dent in the number of income-eligible families that we're serving is critical. It's also important that we start to look at how we're reimbursing our child care providers. Right now, we have a bifurcated reimbursement system, and our center-based providers are reimbursed on a standard reimbursement rate, which is a flat rate around the whole state. And I think everyone here can readily agree that it does not cost the same to live in San Francisco as it does in Fresno or Amador or Los Angeles. So I think that there's some work to be done around the standard reimbursement rate and looking at how it could potentially be regionalized to make it more effective. And the voucher system is paid with a regional market rate, which is a survey that's conducted every 2 years. Many of us have advocated that maybe we shouldn't have two systems for quite some time, but it is a bigger discussion than we can move forward in legislation. So it's something that I would really hope that this commission takes some time looking at how we reimburse our providers, how do we make it commensurate to both their regional needs as well as to the type of care they're providing. So that is one area. The other thing that is sort of the sticky wicket of the early childhood funding system for subsidy is Proposition 98. And the child care programs in California have historically been a part of Proposition 98 until about 4 or 5 years ago. And they were moved out during very difficult budget times, and it was a money decision that was made at the time. What the right placement is, how it should fit, what it should look like, I think all needs to be discussed. But it has created a real system of haves and have-nots at the local level, and a real bifurcation of access to dollars. So I think that is something that would be worthy of considering. And I appreciate the time you've given me, and I look forward to questions.
Okay, thank you for laying out the landscape for us here. A lot to chew on. So next we're going to have the panel up here engage in some questions and answers, so get your questions ready. But I did want to note that we're going to go till 11:30, and there are probably some individuals who want to participate in this Blue Ribbon Commission process. But today we're not hosting public comment. This was just an opportunity for us to kind of collectively gather for the first time and start the process. But our subsequent hearings, we will have public comment, and really, of course, we'll want that as we put together our short-term and long-term recommendations and work plan. So with that, any questions or comments? Yes, Professor McCroskey.
Thank you. I don't want to put you on the spot, Donna and Aaron in particular, but I'm really interested with because you did such a good job of talking about these two charts. How does information flow accord with these different? I know there's multiple information systems, there's multiple platforms, et cetera, but can you explain anything to me about who collects what information about which of these program pieces? Thanks.
The vast majority of these are funded through the California Department of Education. So the information about the number of families served and how programs are administered flows through there. The CalWORks Stage 1 system comes through the Department of Social Services, and any relationship between Stage 1 and 2 happens in that interaction between the two state agencies. At the programmatic level, what families see is usually a local child care agency or a local school. And I think there are wonderful efforts underway to have better communication between local schools and the child care agencies. But often I think the parents really see that storefront entity. One of the goals of the CalWORks child care system was for it to be a seamless system that families didn't know where they were in the process. And I would say that for many families, they don't know where they are in these boxes just because of the complexity. Probably the best source of information families have is the local resource and referral agency, which does give referrals to child care services. I think that we're all considering what more we could do to provide better information about all the subsidy opportunities. I think those programs have been run fairly independently, though often within the same agency. But there does need to be better navigation of families so that they know what they may be eligible for.
Just to add to that, I think one of your questions there, Professor, gets to the heart of what I was saying around the lack of systems between the silos. From a parent's perspective, there is no uniform information system. Depending on which door you walk in, that is what determines what information you get about what you're eligible for, what's around you, what level of how it might meet your needs and your child's needs. It really is a very diverse system of how you get your information. And that is also the same for policymakers, which is, I think, why so often we hear about how complicated the system is. When you look at this crazy chart I've drawn, we don't have an information loop that comes back to policymakers in a uniform way. So, for example, early learning is not connected to the CalPADS longitudinal data system for children in K-12, depending on whether you're on the CalWORks side or on the center-based side. How that information is assembled and sent up to us from DSS and CDE might look a little different. So the Department of Education has its own information system tracking all the children in their subsidized programs, which is separate from DSS's program, which is separate from CalPADS, which is separate from Quality Rating and Improvement System, which is separate from R&R. And then we had the centralized eligibility list that was discontinued in 2008. that used to be 10 or 11. Okay, that used to be at least one strand of information about how many children were waiting for eligible subsidy programs, and that we've lost that piece over time. So anyway, there's a lot of work to do there.
And I just wanted to mention that the R&R Network is working on developing a statewide database. So not in terms of maybe some of the programmatic information on where children are, but one, I think in terms of getting access of information to all families in California, of one, knowing who their local resource and referral agency is, but then also, in addition to that, additional child care information, financial assistance, all of that is sort of an information portal for parents on all things childcare in California. And I think with this database, we're hoping to use this as a foundation to maybe explore how we might expand that into other programs.
Thank you. So I hand over here at that?
Yeah.
Yes, Tonya McMillan.
Thank you. Stage 1. I can't. If I heard correctly, you guys said that the parents are basically in the dark. I'm using air quotes now. Are basically in the dark, like trying to navigate through the Stage 1 program. But I also know that providers also have a lot of difficulty navigating through that program. And Donna, you had said that you guys do have some kind of relationship with Department of Social Services. Can you expound a little bit more about that?
Sure, and it does depend on the county. I'll give you 2 county examples, which are the ones I know best. The first is in Sacramento County, where the Stage 1 program is administered through the County Department of Human Assistance, and they transfer families to their local child care resource and referral agency once they reach stability. And here's my air quotes. Stability is defined differently in every county in California. So once they reach stability, they are moved to their local child care resource and referral agency, and in Sacramento it's Child Action, and they begin to take up payments there. And it is complicated, I know, for providers trying to identify where the approval is, where the check is coming from, and so it is a challenge. In Los Angeles County, the Child Care Alliance of Los Angeles, the 10 alternative payment agencies in LA, have administered Stage 1 with DPSS since its inception. And they work hand in hand to try to move families through the system. But it is not without its challenges. There are communication with different welfare offices, with the new computer system, which has been sort of an interesting dynamic this past couple of years. But there is at least an effort to have that seamless conversation. And the agencies, once they get a referral for a family who is in the Welfare to Work program, the family should consistently move through Stage 1, 2, and 3. But it is not without its challenges, certainly.
Commissioner Ayala?
The other thing, I think some of us have been trying to, as providers, you have the nonprofit or family-based, and then you have school districts, because we're talking about 0 to 5, and which programs get paid out of Prop 98 and which don't. And in my case, it wasn't until I went to go work in Riverside County that I found out what RNRs and APPs. So from a public school point of view, which spent most of my life in, there was very little, if any, knowledge on stages 1, 2, and 3 funding and how we could assist the families and or other providers serving in that community, whether they be Head Start, Early Head Start. So I had to leave the county to find out, but then I came back. but that's, I think, a challenge for us to consider, that systems can be complicated like a TV or a computer, but I know how to turn it on and how to get what I need. So how do we take this very complicated system or systems and make it uncomplicated for the users, whether they be a provider or whether that be a parent? Because ultimately I'd love to see that in the near future.
Commissioner Amati?
Just following that really profound statement about making it easy. I think a lot of times our systems in general are sort of like labyrinths. People don't know how to get the information. If we, as professionals, have a problem seeing the whole picture and how things are connected and communicating, I can't even imagine how difficult it is for parents. So my question is, you named a couple of counties, but is there a kind of a gold standard that we're looking at? I don't know if there is one, but what is it that we're trying to create to make this easy for folks to get access to, understand the effectiveness of a system or what we have?
I don't know that there is a county that does everything perfectly. I think there are examples from county to county of things that work well, and I think there are some emerging best practices, and I think there's some opportunity. I would say that the development of the statewide database is a very positive step toward having a single point of entry for families. Investment is going to be needed so that it is robust enough to be meaningful. I think there's a lot of work to be done between the early childhood world and the K-12 world to realize we're serving the same children. One of the things we've talked about at my organization for years is I already know who's coming to your school. And we're not really maximizing that. There was a point in time when we had a different level of funding where we did an ages and stages assessment of every child in our voucher program. But we don't have the funding to do that anymore. But wouldn't that be valuable to the K-12 system to know? So how do we build those systems bridges between our early childhood system and our K-12 system? And are there opportunities in LCFF or ESSA to start to have those conversations at the local level, and what can be done at the state level to foster that communication and encourage it?
Okay. Thank you. Over here, Commissioner Rivera Campos. Rivera.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you walk us through, for both child care centers and family child care homes, the process that parents go through when they're dealing with foster children? I realize it's probably complicated too, although this could be a discussion, an ongoing discussion. Interested about what happens as a parent first enters and is seeking services, support. And then if you can just do a quick glimpse of how the CDE and the other state agencies work together to support these families.
I guess that's me again. Dang. So theoretically, I'll start with that. A family, a resource family, a foster family has a child placed with them, and they have a job or go to school, and they need access to child care so that they're able to accept that child into the system. There is a priority set for families in the child protective system, in the CDE funded programs. Primarily where that falls in is the very teeny tiny alternative payment program, which is full and has waiting lists of hundreds of thousands. So what ends up happening is they find a lot of closed doors. There also is similar eligibility in Head Start, in general child care, and in state preschool. Those programs are often enrolled at a certain time of year. So if you happen to have a 3 or 4 year old that is placed with you in August, you've got a really good shot at getting some help. Beyond that, it is very challenging. And there are several different efforts underway to look at these issues. There was a convening that was sponsored in January, which Senator Mitchell and Assemblymember Thurmond participated in, to look at some of these systems barriers. But the biggest systems barrier is resource. I don't know if that answered your question, but I'm happy to talk more offline.
Great,
But one of the issues, if I could add, that you'll hear, I'm sure, over and over again from folks when you start hearing in public comment and folks start talking about all of the myriad issues we would love for a commission like this to think about comprehensively, are the special needs of the children who are coming in the door. This idea that it's not a one-size-fits-all issue. The commissioners already spoke to this, the great needs of dual language learners and how we're thinking about that in terms of best practices when they are the majority of the children we are serving. We're thinking about foster children, we're thinking about homeless children, and we're thinking about children with special needs who could or could not be receiving funds under IDEA. So these are issues we would want, as you're thinking about what a system looks like, to also be thinking about that comprehensively at school age as well as in early learning.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to have Commissioner Ignatius, then Kong, Bouthé, and then back to McMillan. Ignatius?
Thank you. Commissioner Ignatius, that was really interesting to hear that.
Yes.
This is really happening.
Could be assembly members.
So thank you for all three of your presentations. I mean, they were just so thorough, and this chart reveals the complication, but also to me, just I remember seeing something similar to this 11 years ago and thinking, what did I just get myself into? But what I also realized is that we can't have a one-size-fits-all program. I mean, our families are not one-size-fits-all. Our children change ages every year and need different services. And so I just appreciated the way you laid this out. And what's funny from just a parent perspective, this idea that the goals of, is this a program that is serving parents or is this a program that's serving the child development needs of children? Parents don't see those as mutually exclusive. Every choice they're making is a combination of both of them. And often those choices aren't really even choices because of just our under-resourced system. And you mentioned eligibility, and we talked a little bit about the minimum wage, and I think if I have to hear another parent say to me, unfortunately, I got a raise, unfortunately, I got a promotion, again, I mean, these are the things that they're looking to us saying, why is this happening? It makes absolutely no sense. And for the mothers in particular who are on the CalWorks program, who are working those non-traditional hours in those service industries, the recertification process, which requires them to come in multiple times a year to recertify, I don't know any, I mean, what we expect of these women is unbelievable. And I don't think anybody else would do it. And much like the student from USC, those are these parents who are going to school, going to work, part-time, full-time, making it all work. And thankfully, there are family child care providers and exempt care providers who are willing to deal with it. But then one piece of paperwork might mean you don't get paid. And these are simple solutions that we can figure out statewide that don't have to continue any longer. And so I really hope that this commission prioritizes those as well. So it wasn't really a question, more comment, but thank you.
We want commentary as well. That's perfectly fine. Okay, Commissioner Kong?
Well, I heard both Commissioner Amati and Donna Snerger talk about the importance of alignment between early childhood education and early elementary, and we know that's so important if we want to sustain the gains that our children make in those early years. I'd love to hear from, if we could, another commissioner on what your experience has been in providing these services, state preschool, transitional kindergarten, the barriers that you've seen and the opportunities, and also from Donna on that.
Okay, that's allowed. Cross-commissioner investigations. That's okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think the question was to you, Superintendent.
I think one of the things that a lot of school districts struggle with in starting new programs is actually space. In our school district, we wouldn't be able to have a transitional kindergarten at every single site. So that's one issue. But I have to go back to, even with the spaces that people have, it's the communication between all the different entities, all the child care. Like you said, I wish we still could have that. And this isn't unique just to preschool. As a superintendent, and in my previous positions, I would see, unfortunately, young people who would have issues in our school systems and would, very few, would go to, let's say, the juvenile justice system, and they would just be thrown back in with no one to hold them, to help them, to support them. So it's that the connection to me is so important between the different entities. Somebody mentioned it's a patchwork quilt. It's actually a beautiful patchwork quilt, as everybody has said. There are lots of different parts. We just have to figure out how to polish it, how to make those connections flexible enough so that it meets the different needs of different communities and different individuals. And then obviously, I just have to say, you will continue to hear this from superintendents and from educators that, like everybody here, lack of resources is a huge issue. When you talk about being 40th in the nation, as much as we want to take it away from funding, that's really what it gets down to in a lot of ways, in addition to other things.
And, I think just speaking from the Child Care Resource Center perspective, it's a bandwidth thing for us in many ways. There are a myriad of local education agencies in our service area, school districts, county offices, and trying to participate in everyone's local control funding plan. I mean, we'd love to go to all their community meetings, but we don't have the resources to do it. So I think that's the biggest challenge for us. And I do think that one of the things that your resource and referral system could be better funded to do is be that bridge and the conduit between the providers, who are even more removed, and the school systems. If given that charge and given the resources to be able to do it. And I think that that's something we've talked about continually since LCFF passed, is how can we get to the table with all these different plans? And there just aren't enough time. Yeah, TK.
Did you have a second piece to that, Commissioner Hong? Okay. Over here, Commissioner Bouthé.
So thank you, ladies. Really appreciated the information. And this question is to you, Rowena. I was particularly struck by your chart in terms of the decrease in capacity in California. And I'm very familiar with the subsidized childcare world, and I'm really familiar that we have decreased capacity tremendously since 2008, especially with infant toddler care. As you were citing, I know we're about 50% below what we used to be in 2008. So I'm thinking about this and thinking about our strategies, and if we're looking to increase access and we have no actual place to put these children, obviously we've got a big, huge barrier to overcome. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about what you're hearing in the private world in terms of why programs are closing. Obviously in the subsidized world, it has a lot to do with increased rents. It has a lot to do with decreased subsidies, issues with capacity building, issues with ETK and TK and filling programs and fully earning contracts and all of those wonderful issues that we all know about. But again, looking really at the private side, what you're hearing, and whether the Resource and Referral Network has thought about what some strategies could be in terms of sort of reversing this trend and looking forward to building capacities in the future.
It's a lot to think about in terms of the capacity of the private side, because I think, it is sort of a cornerstone for the subsidized childcare. If there are no places for families to go, where can we put those contracts, or where will families be able to spend those vouchers? In our last report, so I'm going to speak a little bit about family child care. Just we asked, because one, we've seen the biggest decline around family child care, and in our last report, we worked closely with our local resource and referral agencies to find out what also they've been hearing from providers. So, since the Great Recession, that had a huge impact on providers in the foreclosures and losing their homes, which is the place of their business, and not fully being able to recover from that. We also have, I think, an aging workforce, and we are not bringing on new licensees, a younger workforce, to sort of replace that turnover. And then, also just the cost of providing that care, I think, is really is a really important one to look at, because I think what parents are able to pay and what it costs for a provider to run their business doesn't always even out or is profitable for providers, and so they're having to look for second jobs to supplement the incomes that they get through their businesses. And I'm sure Tanya can definitely speak to more of that. To more of that than I can. But I think also what was mentioned earlier around space is a really interesting issue. If we're also looking for centers to open up spaces, space is also a premium, and that's very expensive to rent out. I think not being able to purchase that space is critical. I know from the network's perspective, I know that the Child Care Initiative Project has done a lot of work to recruit family child care home providers and increase the supply there. I can get some numbers together if that would be helpful for you on their efforts to reach out to providers. And specifically, it's building the family child care home supply, but also for infants and toddlers.
I'll enlighten my fellow commissioner a little bit further on that too, because personally, I know that after Governor Schwarzenegger had cut all of the child care funding, I went for months with no pay, and what little bit I had saved up, I ended up having to spend to keep my doors open. And then even with that, I still had reached this point where I had to send letters to my parents and tell them, if things don't change by a certain date, I gotta quit. I can't continue. And having, like she said, never recovered from that to this day, I have found myself in a position where I'm transitioning out of doing my job that I love to do, because I've never had an opportunity to have enough money to put aside for retirement. I don't want to be a burden on my two sons who are already looking at taking care of me. And that's not what I think anybody wants their child to do. You want them to live their lives to the fullest and don't worry about my mom is okay. And so there are just a lot of bits and pieces in this work that are brought on because of the system that definitely needs to be reformed.
Okay. Thank you. We're actually back to you anyway, Commissioner. Yes.
Thank you. So, Aaron, I'm really glad that you have mentioned the special needs part, because you cannot exclude special needs children or children with developmental delays. And so what I'd like to know is one of the things that we do with Local 99 with the union is that we have now we put forth these workshops, and we educate providers on things like what to look for with special needs children, because we're the first ones who see this, and we actually find ourselves in positions where we can have these very difficult conversations with parents about our observations. So are there any funding streams or resources? Are there any partnerships that are happening that addresses this particular area in childcare?
Thank you for the question. So there is an incredible amount of work being done differently in each county who's undertaking it. The beauty of local control, which is something that you will all grapple with as you're thinking about what the system looks like moving forward. But when it comes to developmental screening and the critical role of the pediatrician in terms of providing that developmental screen and communicating with teachers, with parents about what needs to happen about being responsive to the needs of the child, that is definitely a component of the early learning system and articulation within the early learning system that needs to be looked at, and the role of supporting the child care provider, the first teacher, when they're identifying those issues is absolutely a piece that I know many First Fives across the state are leaders in and would be very happy to work with the Commission as you're looking at those issues moving forward. And to get to the last point you were making prior to your question, so much of this is about capacity building for the first teachers, right? It's about capacity building. And when you look at, it's no mystery that we're also looking at teacher shortage in K through 12. We're looking at a teacher shortage in early learning due to compensation, due to lack of capacity building, a lack of professional supports to be able to do the very best job you know you need to do by children in an incredibly fast-changing environment. When you think about the rate at which science is coming out and helping to inform the way that we care for and support our kids, what we're asking from these first teachers is unbelievable. And so as you are moving forward and thinking about what the system needs to look like, how we're supporting the workforce and thinking about it not in isolation, not as one standard you have to meet, but as a career lattice, where at the local level we're thinking about what it takes to provide high quality, wonderful care that all of these professionals have gotten into this business to do, how we can do that for the twin goals of supporting the child and keeping them in the profession as they become more and more excellent at their job. And that is a very standard conversation we hear in K-12, and we think about career support. So just wanted to add that. And I think that the developmental screening and additional supports for children that go beyond social emotional learning, that is absolutely a core competency that our providers need.
Great, thank you. Mr. Olenek.
So going back a little bit to the whole consumer awareness piece, I wonder if any of you could sort of compare and contrast, feels like one of these doctoral questions, if you could compare and contrast Title 22 requirements, Title 5 requirements, basic requirements for TK, ETK, and then throw in the Head Start model on top of that. Because I think it's really complicated to try to figure out what the heck you're supposed to do, because they're all different.
Well, so to start off, they are all different, and if we have this wonderful luxury of talking to you about things you should be looking at, that's a crosswalk you should be looking at. I mean, and we could probably spend an hour walking through the tiny differences in environmental requirements and large significant differences in ratios and differences in teacher requirements. I mean, it goes on and on and on. But at the end of the line, you have Title 22 that right now is the minimum standard for health and safety and has incredible impacts in the private sector as well as the public sector. And it's a huge, important landmark if you think about it as a commission and what it represents, whether you're in a school-based setting, whether you're in a licensed setting, and with implications for license-exempt settings as we talk about subsidized license-exempt settings, and there's always, with the requirements of federal government around annual licensing inspections, a whole other issue you may or may not be looking at. You have to think about all these implications. Then you have Title V, which is meant to be above Title 22 and providing this additional educational support lens, hence the idea that you, for example, have higher ratio requirements because the child-teacher interaction is meant to meet a certain standard in Title V, and there's a belief that that ratio is supporting that goal. So you've got Title V as an overlay on top of Title 22. Then you have quality rating and improvement systems, right, where the professionals across the state have come together and looked at a tiered standard to try to increase, whether you're Title 22 or Title V, how to move towards higher quality regardless of the regs that might exist in a particular day. And then you have TK and ETK, which are not subject to any of it. right? They're subject to the influences of being inside of a K-12 system and have the requirements of a credentialed teacher, have the requirements of the local control funding formula, which is moving towards a 1 to 24 class size over time, but is not necessarily there yet or anywhere close to there in certain communities, and doesn't have any of the same environmental setting requirements that you see in early learning, but I think where you're trying to lead us serves the same kids. So we have an incredible difference in terms of how the kids get there, why they're there, and what they get when they're there based off of the door their parent decides to walk in if they're 4 years old. And that, I think, was an example I know Donna was thinking about when she was preparing to present today. I mean, that's just a good example. That's just for 4-year-olds, and all those differentials exist for other ages as well. So that's why this comprehensive look is very crucial.
And I would add that there's a workforce dynamic to that conversation as well that you should consider. And on two fronts. One, there are very different compensation structures amongst the different programs and different funding levels. And what ends up happening in a depleted workforce that people aren't that interested in entering because of the compensation levels is that we begin to compete amongst each other for the more highly qualified teachers, and you have a lot of movement in a system that's already known for a really high turnover rate. And I think that is a challenge that we also need to look at. I know we administer Head Start contracts, and we have a lot of Head Start teachers that then go to teach in the K-12 system, to teach TK. And I think that presents a different set of challenges related to these different criteria. The other thing is we keep increasing what we're expecting of the workforce in these different structures, and we really are not increasing what we're paying them. And I'll go back to my prior comments about being efficient to the point that it hurts us. We have a population of caregivers who want to do the right thing by kids, and they do that to the detriment of their own financial futures. And as we look at recruiting a new generation, the next generation may not be so interested in doing that. So this is going to be a real systemic challenge, and I know it's the same challenge in K-12. You know, teachers are supplying their own classrooms. So I think that there's a lot to look at in this area.
Okay, thank you. Assemblymember Ting?
Thank you. So two questions, I guess. One question is I know it seems like we're in complete agreement that the field is resource constrained, and so I don't know if the nonprofit providers, the coalition providers, have looked at different potential revenue options or revenue opportunities to bring in more money for early childhood education. And also, just to focus on the 4-year-old population for a second, we have three main streams that take care of 4-year-olds. One is you have sort of the private preschools and daycare providers who take care of 4-year-olds. You have the state preschools, and then you also have kids in TK. And it's sort of this odd jumble for this particular age group. If you would step back for a second and go, well, what do you think the best way to handle 4-year-olds would be? How would you design it, separate from all of the wonderful state laws and policies that seem to have confused the situation?
Well, I'll start with the resource question.
Who would have thought that was the easy one?
Right. I depending on the group and the year, we've seen incredibly wide-ranging estimates in the billions of what it would take in resources. There have been many who have argued that the future trajectory of resource development in our state is going to be at the local level, that's where folks are most interested. However, even if the future of resource generation is at the local level, there will always be incredible equity issues at the state level. The state, I think, has a crucial function to think about and responsibility to think about. So no matter where you see all of the pieces of making that patchwork quilt thicker and warmer, right? No matter where you see that coming from, there will be an important state role. And I think that's going to be a hard task that this commission would need to grapple with, as well as finding ways to allow locals to go further if they have the public will to go further.
Let me just be more specific, right? I mean, unless the commission wanted to propose taking from CalWorks, taking from Medi-Cal, or taking from K-12, which we can't take, or we're taking from higher ed, where are we going to get more money? And that's something that I propose to everybody who comes to come see me about the budget and resources, because these are all things that we care deeply about. I mean, this is not, I mean, I don't say it to make light of it. Something, we care deeply about ECE, we care deeply about Medi-Cal, about public health. These are all very, very important things. And we're at a challenge where we're consistently resource constrained. So my question is back to especially those of you who represent, either labor or nonprofits or community groups. Where are we going to get the money?
So I don't think you would ever hear any advocate come up here and say you should take away from Program X and give it to me, because we probably wouldn't be sitting up here the next time to answer that question. And to be very clear, we have seen in the most extreme resource environments what has happened to early childhood in the state government, in the state budget, based off of where it lies. So I think question number one is, or I guess the answer number one would be, we have to structurally rethink how money for the early learning system is generated and how it is protected within the budget if you want it to be generated and you want it to be protected within the budget. Many folks have put forward that it probably means increased resource acquisition from somewhere. Obviously, early learning polls better than almost anything anyone sees, both nationally at the state level and many local municipalities. How to leverage that if we're thinking about the future of what is a scarce resource environment for many competing priorities as the legislature has been grappling with. But it's also about where early learning fits in other things you're doing. For example, in the housing crisis. With a housing crisis, with urban infill crises, come childcare crises. Where are the families who are living in those areas? Where are their children being cared for, and what does that look like? Integrating that into that conversation. As you're thinking about the future of the K-12 system and bridging the achievement gap, how is early learning a strategy within those scarce funds in order to prevent future costs in special education, in dropouts, and in remediation later on? I don't think it's a one-size, one-resource fund fits all issue, but it certainly is dire. And unfortunately, you guys don't have the luxury of making 20-year budgets where you say, oh, yeah, well, we'll save this money down the road, and so we're okay with putting it forward now. But surprisingly, that an example I heard just the other day was when the Ontario province in Canada was faced with an $18 million deficit, which for them, of course, is enormous because they're just Ontario. When they were faced with an $18 million deficit in their budget, that's when they chose to fund universal 0 to 5. That's when they chose to do it, because they thought we're going to be back in this $18 million deficit and then some in a few years if we don't start the front investment now and look at it as an investment on future savings. So we have to stop the cycle of deficit spending now with an upfront investment. Fascinating political perspective for them in Canada.
Anyone want to take a crack at my 4-year-old question?
I'll take a first crack at it. I think ideally what you would want for a parent is, regardless of the setting they are able to access, that their child has a similar preschool experience. I don't think that's what we have right now. And I think that we have inequities in what the standards are and what the curriculum is, and for families who cannot afford themselves a part-day program, they really are locked into a Title 22 private center. And so I think that there are some inherent challenges just in the way we've structured this, and knowing how policy change happens incrementally. I don't think it's entirely surprising that we find ourselves here, but I think it's important that we recognize that we have created inequities in the type of service our 4-year-old children are getting, depending what they are eligible for, what their families can access, and where it's being provided.
I think if I could add to it, I think that the 4-year-old space is actually an exciting opportunity to think about how we meet these twin needs of a working family and the development of the child, and to think about how we create effective bridges with K-12. Not to say K-12 is where the future of 4-year-old care is, or community-based is where the future of care is, but to try to bring the two of them together, as Donna said, to think about what it takes to achieve the child development goals you have. You have different ratios, 1 to 10 for Head Start, 1 to 24 for TK, 1 to 8 for CSPP, 1 to 12 if they're receiving a voucher for 4-year-old care. So the 4 different settings I can think of at the moment. We should think about how you want to spend your money in the state on 4-year-old care. Realize it might come through different settings with different needs, and be comprehensive about it, and to think about not shutting doors for a parent. One of the items I know we've talked about quite a bit is in the systems development is there should be no wrong door for a parent. If they show up at the school campus because that's where they feel safe, if they've shown up at the community preschool center because they feel safe and they're familiar with it, how do they know they're going to get the best care available for their child that meets their needs? And if it's not the location they show up, that they can go to the location where they're going to receive it. And that there's a statement from the state behind that as to what we are standing for what that child gets. There's a lot of efficiencies and streamlining that could happen to try to help us get there.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'd expect nothing less of our Assembly Budget Chair asking about resources. So while we're on this topic, I know we have some other questions, but I know the Superintendent wanted to jump in. But I just want to say that as first for the 4-year-old, I think that's a key issue. It is kind of an elephant in the room that public education is free for roughly 13 years, but if you're a family and you have a kid born during that fall, you have a free 14th year of public education. So, the soccer fields, people don't quite understand it. What do you mean? How do you get that free universal preschool, pre-K experience? And so I realize that that is an issue, that's something that we want to talk about in this. And I think it was mentioned earlier, we do want to be visionary. I think we do need a couple $1 billion more. I know we had an initiative on the ballot a couple years ago. We talked about this. I'm sure someone's going to come up again and focus on that. But I think we want to be looking at what the vision is so we can have universal access for all 3- and 4-year-olds in that period, knowing that we do have a hodgepodge system right now, but that's kind of what we're looking to zero in on it. So I know that you, Superintendent, wanted to answer that question from an educator perspective.
Actually, it's probably not a popular thing to say, but if we're going to stop this whole competing interests about funding, it has to be Prop 13, has to be addressed, so that we're not sitting here fighting over crumbs every year. I would say if we're really talking about making fundamental changes from birth to career, that's what we need to look at. Because as I sit here and look at the competing interests, you're absolutely right. The grant that was given to school districts to encourage classified members to get their credentials, we were thrilled to do that. We have 5 classified employees who said, I want to get my credential, but we have to find a way to have that stream of folks who want to go into this work, which means we have to be able to pay them more.
Okay, thank you. You were up for your question now anyway, so did you have a question?
Really my question was then, are we really talking about the whole system? It's the whole family, it's the whole child. My question is actually for all of us. It's a really wonderful group of folks and the presenters, but really, when you talk about what we're doing in kindergarten and TK, we used to do in 1st grade and 2nd grade. So how do we look at the whole child and the social, emotional well-being of students in preschool and through K-12?
Well, let me interject there, because when we talked about this commission, granted the speaker's wisdom and leadership a year ago put this forward, and we did debate back and forth. Do we want to do 0 through 8? Certainly the general child care goes up in the later ages as well, but we just really wanted to focus on the lens of those first 5 years, knowing that there are other issues we can look at too. And so we look at the child and, most importantly, the family, how they engage for these first 5 years. And so that was kind of our work plan and idea. And certainly there'll be some things from the outside, and inevitably people will come up to us and ask us to take a look at these other pieces. But we think that's a meaty enough thing to tackle anyway, to come up with in a visionary framework going forward. So Commissioner Campos Rivera.
I'll just make it very quick because I know we're... Thank you. I'll make it quick because I know we're running out of time. But going back to Assemblymember Ting's comment, I think that's an absolutely valid point. And I think what I like to think is that this body can be helpful in providing recommendations and ideas of ways where we can become more effective and more efficient. LCFF model is just one example of how California has moved forward as a result of the leadership here in this table, legislators. So I absolutely agree. I mean, where are the resources going to come from? We're not going to cannibalize off of higher education or any other critical piece that's important to our work. But I hope that this body is able to really look at models that are working and really provide really good opportunities or policy recommendations for you all to consider.
Okay. Commissioner Ignatius?
I'll be also very quick. On the revenue question, I second Prop 13 all the way. But right now, the legislature and the governor have made agreements on the amount of money they're willing to put into the system every year. And because of the way our contracts work, when dollars get out the door, counties aren't able to spend those dollars and they get swept. And I think just at a beginning, trying to identify ways that the agreements that have been made here get to stay in those counties so that they can use those dollars, because we have 1.2 million eligible children not being served. It's not because those counties don't need those dollars. It's just all of the red tape around it. And so I think that alone, to have that discussion in the budget process, I think it's at least $100 million every year since 2012, and that's significant. And then the other piece around the CalWORK system, Donna mentioned, when you get that voucher and the portability and flexibility that you can have for your child up until they're 12, their 13th birthday, if they're not getting stage 1 child care from the very beginning, they've lost that opportunity, and that's where it is an entitlement. So the more we can do to make sure that those families, when they are entering the CalWORKs program, are getting the child care subsidy that they're entitled to, that will stay with them all the way as well.
Okay. Commissioner Ayala?
My question and a request is in terms of calendaring these meetings.
Yes.
And then topics, because I know that some of us have some experience, some of us have other experiences, and that's why we're such a wonderful group. But we also then need to hear from others so that we can have the same framework by which we could make recommendations. So mine was, do we have an idea of how often, for how long?
Well, nice segue, because we're going to shut down in a little bit, and we did.
I just didn't want to leave without.
Yeah, and we'll be a little bit maybe more generous on time closing here. So if anybody has some closing comments, but maybe we'll shut down the Q&A part here, and I'll just I did have some questions, but I'll save that for another day because I think it was a great debate up here. And you're right, we want to hear from each other, but also we want to hear from people out there in California, not just, frankly, at the state capitol in room 4202, but we're going to kind of take this show on the road in different communities across California and rural areas we talked about in the Valley or Inland Empire. I'm not sure if we're going to go to Modoc County. There's not much transportation up there, and the Bay Area, Los Angeles, of course. And so we're thinking in a couple months that we'll have our next meeting, and our staff from the Speaker's office is going to coordinate. Now, there's 15 of us. It's hard to herd cats, 15 people. Luckily, there's only 6 legislators, so it's easier with more public members. But not everyone's going to be able to participate in every one, and we understand that. We're pleased that everyone is here today. So we're thinking in a couple months. And again, we're looking to go different areas across California. And I'll just, while we're speaking right now, I again want to thank the speaker and our co-chair Garcia for engaging in this, and thank all of you and people out there here today, our panelists and people who care about this issue. I think the clever phrase you may have seen on the agenda, that I know that the speaker came up with this himself, why early is potent. And so when you look at potent, the definition of great power, influence, or effect, and we know that the 0 through 5 had such an impact. We didn't really talk about him today, but take home this little thing with you here. Professor or Dr. Heckman, the Heckman equation talks about there's nothing we can do in society that can have more of a bang for a buck than investing in early learning. And that's what we want to do, is focus on how we can have, to answer Budget Chairman Ting's question, more resources, but also what we can do internally. I know there's, we can look at alignment. There are certain things that we can streamline to make it easier so monies aren't swept going to the Department of Corrections or elsewhere. So that's kind of the task we have before us. So with that, any closing comments from anybody? Any parting wisdom? Thank you. Okay, hearing none, we will adjourn, and thanks everybody for participating today.